Globally, a woman or girl is killed by a member of her own family approximately every 10 minutes.
Every 10 minutes.
That's a staggering statistic. Welcome to the Deep Dive, where today we're focusing on a truly critical issue. Femicide, the intentional killing of women and girls because of their gender.
And what's striking is just the sheer breadth of information surrounding this. We've looked at reports from, UN Women, UNODC, the World Health Organization, Amnesty International, quite a range of academic research, too.
Right.
Our goal isn't really to drown you in data, but to try and pull out the crucial insights. What exactly is femicide? What are its root causes? What does it look like globally? And maybe most importantly, what can actually be done about it?
Yeah, let's try and make sense of it all. So let's get right to it. When we talk about femicide, what's the core definition we need to sort of grasp? Okay, so the fundamental definition, and this comes through really clearly across all the sources, is the intentional killing of women and girls because of their gender.
That specific element, the gender-related motivation, that's what makes it different from general homicide.
Because of...
Exactly. And you'll also hear the term feminicide, especially used in Latin America.
Yes.
What's significant there is that feminicide often carries the specific emphasis on the state's role or its failure, its negligence, its impunity in preventing and addressing these killings.
So femicide is maybe the broader term for the act itself, but feminicide adds this layer of state accountability. Is that fair?
That's a great way to put it, yeah. Scholars like Marcelle Lagarde, her work has been really key in highlighting this difference. It pushes us to look beyond just the individual act, It forces us to consider the bigger picture, the societal failures, the systemic issues like state negligence or impunity that kind of let this violence continue. It's about context.
That's a really important distinction. Okay, so how different is femicide from just general homicide where the victim happens to be a woman? It's not the same thing, is it?
No, absolutely not. Femicide is really the extreme end of the spectrum of gender-based violence against women and girls. And the difference in who the perpetrator is, it's quite stark.
How so?
Well, globally, in 2023, roughly 60% of all intentional homicides of women and girls were carried out by intimate partners or other family members.
60%?
Yeah. Now, compare that to homicides of men. Only about 12% are killed by partners or family.
Huge difference.
Huge. And here's a key insight from the WHO data consistently. Most femicides are committed by current or former partners, and it often happens after a period of ongoing abuse.
Right.
So tragically, for so many women, their own home, which should be a safe place, is statistically the most dangerous place for them.
That's just, a deeply disturbing reality.
Yeah.
Now, our sources also break down different types of femicide. It's not all the same phenomenon.
No, definitely not. It's not monolithic. It shows up in several distinct ways. Probably the most common globally is intimate partner femicide. That's the killing of a woman by a current or former partner. And it often escalates from a pattern of abuse, coercive control.
The final act of control sometimes.
Often, yes. Then you have what are termed honor-related killings. This is where women are murdered, usually by family members, for something that's seen as a transgression against patriarchal norms.
Like around sexual behavior or family reputation, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And what's really unsettling here is how often these crimes happen with impunity. They're sometimes justified using distorted ideas about tradition or religion.
And these honor killings, they tend to be more concentrated in certain parts of the world, right?
Yes, unfortunately. Another significant type, especially prevalent in the Indian subcontinent, is dowry-related femicide. This stems from conflicts over dowry demands.
Right.
Then we also have non-intimate femicide, so killings by people who don't have that intimate or family connection.
Okay, what falls under that?
Well, things like sexual femicide, where killing involves sexual violence, sometimes systematic killings linked to organized crime, and also the murders of women in marginalized groups, like sex workers, who are often much more vulnerable.
It sounds like the spectrum is really quite broad. Are there other, maybe newer or emerging forms that are being recognized?
Yeah, our understanding keeps evolving. We're seeing more recognition of things like armed conflict femicide, where women and girls are specifically targeted during war. There's also corrective femicide, which is the killing of individuals because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. That's deeply concerning.
I've read about the rates against trans women in Latin America.
Exactly. They're alarmingly high. Then you also have femicide linked to human trafficking, related to organized crime, racist femicide, where racism and misogyny intersect, and transphobic femicide.
Wow.
And here's a really crucial, complex point. There's also female-perpetrated femicide,
women involved in killing other women.
Yes. For instance, sometimes women are complicit in dowry disputes or even honor killings. It really challenges that simple victim-perpetrator idea, you know?
Yeah.
It shows how deeply embedded these patriarchal power structures can be.
It's definitely much more intricate than I first thought. So, okay, let's dig into the origins. What are the really fundamental factors driving femicide?
Well, it comes from this complex mix of factors, but really at its heart, it's about gender inequality and systemic discrimination against women and girls.
Right.
That creates this environment, this social context where violence against women is, well, too often tolerated or even normalized.
And things like harmful social norms,
Pre-
stereotypes.
Absolutely. Those, plus pervasive patriarchal structures, are major drivers. Think about honor killings. Again, they're such a stark example of how deadly social norms can become.
And you mentioned control earlier. That power dynamic in relationships seems key too.
Totally critical. Unequal power dynamics, the desire for control, using coercion in relationships. These are huge factors. In intimate partner violence, like we said, femicide is often that ultimate act of control, especially when a woman tries to leave.
That period of separation.
Exactly. It's often the most dangerous time.
Our sources brought up the WHO's ecological model for risk factors. Can you sort of walk us through that? How does it help understand the different levels of risk?
Yeah, the WHO model is really useful. It looks at risk factors on 4 connected levels. So first, there's the individual level, looking at the perpetrator.
Okay.
Factors here include things like unemployment, having access to guns, making threats to kill, sexual coercion, substance abuse, maybe a personal history of abuse themselves.
Right. And for the victim.
Interestingly, at the individual victim level, the risk factors are less clearly defined in the research, although things like education and living separately from a partner might offer some protection.
Okay. What's the next level?
Family or relationship level. Here, key risks are things like a history of severe and recent intimate partner violence, the presence of stepchildren in the home, separation or attempted separation, like we discussed, and controlling behaviors by the male partner.
Makes sense. Then the community.
Yep, community level. Risks here include prevailing social norms that maybe give men privilege or seem to condone violence against women. Also, low levels of economic independence for women in that community.
And finally, the big picture, societal level.
Exactly, societal or structural level. This covers things like gender inequality in government structures, cuts to social welfare spending, weak legal penalties for sexual violence, widespread ideas about male sexual entitlement, and cultural beliefs about family honor or female sexual purity.
So a whole system reinforcing it.
Pretty much. But there are also protective factors at this level. Things like having a visible and effective police force, rules that restrict firearm access for abusers, mandatory arrest policies if someone violates a restraining order.
You mentioned firearms earlier. That link between guns and intimate partner femicide seems really strong in some places.
It really is. In countries like the U.S. and South Africa, for example, the correlation between gun ownership and intimate partner femicide is alarmingly high. The WHO actually specifically suggests that reducing firearm availability could be a critical prevention strategy in those contexts.
This paints such a concerning picture of all the factors involved.